I could see no one either ahead or behind. I was truly alone in the vast expanse of the Sahara Desert, having completed nearly 4 marathons in 4 days, whilst carrying everything I needed to survive on my back. With over 2 marathons left to go, in what is dubbed the toughest foot race on earth, I had nothing left. I was broken, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It was just me and my spirit, or what was left of it, remaining. In the midst of the Sahara Desert, I dropped my pack and collapsed on my knees, on the sand, totally spent. I looked up to the heavens, to the overwhelming beauty of the stars and the universe above, and just shouted, "What the bleep am I doing? Why me? If I'm truly meant to do this, then give me a sign, because I'm done." Then the unexpected happened. I got my answer.
So, what if you cried out to the heavens for an answer? What might you find? Well, to talk about life and its great adventures is Deri Llewellyn-Davies. You may have heard him in our previous interview about F the fear, it's not real anyway. Well, now we're going to go deeper into the why and the how he has created this epic life, and how you, Deri, have actually helped other people around the world recognize that their life, too, can be an adventure. Although maybe not as crazy as yours with these marathons and trekking across jungles and deserts and the highest peaks on the planet. But thank you for being with me again, Deri.
Always a pleasure, darling. Always a pleasure.
Well, your life has been truly an inspiration, I know, to many people. And the impact that you've had on my life, I believe, is truly momentous. So I'm super excited to explore life's great adventure. This is your book, which is now going into its 2nd edition. Super excited because I think, as you've pointed out in the book, there's so many life lessons that you learned, many of which you learned the hard way. And I'm really grateful that you're open and so vulnerable in sharing, because again, one could look at you and imagine that you've got it all figured out. Like you just must be, on top of everything in this guide to living an adventurous, purposeful life, whatever your passion. But you actually explained that there were a lot of mistakes you made along the way, including mistakes that could have cost you your life.
Yes, indeed. And those are the mistakes you don't want to make. So they're all relative compared to those ones, I'm sure.
Well, take me through the why. We did talk about a bit of this in our previous interview, but in case folks didn't tap into that one, you have a big driving why, your sense of purpose for why you've created this epic lifestyle. Take me to that and then explain why you decided to put it in book format.
Yes, so it's the story I talk about wherever I go, right? My 2 prime messages from any stage and any genre is live a life of no regret and build a business of no regrets. That's it for me. If those 2 things in my life, it's those two points. It came from the death of my father. That was where this primary message came from. I won't go into the depths of it in this interview because we've covered it off on the other interview we did together. But sitting there on my father's deathbed, seeing my dad look into my eye and telling me, "Son, I regret so much in life." That's enough for me. Thanks very much, to make sure I am not going out that way. And my father, God bless him, he left me a legacy in those moments. A legacy that will stand with me together forever, to go, you look up to people, you see people, and life looks, from the outside looking in, everyone's normal and everything seems fine. Are you truly living? Are you truly living the life, a true adventure, right? Are you really living the life that you were supposed to live, the one that is true to you? In my dad's case, God bless him, not at all. And he went out and with regret, and he'll never get that back. So that's my driving force, is from that point. And that's when it began for me. This is when my life step changed. This is where I threw everything. I've been throwing my whole body and soul at life to this, and I'll continue going. It's an epic adventure in all areas of life. And that's where the adventures began for me. However, the book was written for a different reason. It came because this book was about the adventures. So actually, I started it from the point of my father's death and the big primary message of live a life of no regrets. And then it's one of the final chapters of this book, which I won't spoil for people, but it's about my experience on Denali, which is the highest mountain in North America, brutal mountain, and one that I will never forget in a hurry. And on that mountain, I had quite a profound moment, and looked death in the eye several times in one day. And I came back from that to my young daughter at the time, and I realized that despite Daddy being smashing it and going out, at this point, I'd been really pushing the envelope for about 5-6 years at this point. I realized that if I had died on that mountain, that my daughter would never know what Daddy stood for, never know what Daddy'd done. She'd have some clues that I'd done some things, but she never knew what I learned, what my life lessons were, what I stood for in life. And I came back and I wrote this book. And it was from that point, this is when I wrote this now, it's quite a while back now, but I wrote it for my daughter. Now my daughter is now 9, coming up to 10, bless her. And now I've got 2 more. So my 3 beautiful girls, I dedicated the book to all 3 this time in this version. I wrote it for them. It was not meant to be published. And I think that's an important thing, in that a lot of people write the books to be published. Mine was not meant to be published.
Right. So this was more like a journal that you would pass down to them so that they, if, heaven forbid, you should go away too soon, they would have a record of, in your Absolutely. Own words. Yeah, beautiful.
This is, and every chapter is an adventure. So every chapter is taking one of the adventures. It's metaphorically. I'm using adventure, the real adventure, metaphorically, but it's not about climbing mountains and running deserts. It's about your adventure, whatever that may be to you, whether that's an adventure of music or spirituality or yoga, whatever your adventure is. And it was to take them on this journey with me. So they would never, they'd know what I stood for, all the lessons I've learned. I've woven in the back of the chapters, I wove in exercises that I've used from the greatest masters and all my personal development and all my learnings. I wove those exercises in so my girls would know the exercises that I've pondered that took me to where I am. And that's why I'm also very, very transparent, very vulnerable in this book, because I needed to be for my daughters. I wanted them to know the truth. And that's why when I published it in the first version, it was hard for me because it wasn't meant to be published. It was an accident, as accidents happen with the universe, doesn't it? And several years ago, we went to the market for about 2 years, and then I pulled it from the market because I wasn't ready to share. Because there's some very deep stuff in this book, and there's some deeper spiritual messages in this book. And I'm in the business genre, and I wasn't ready to split my audience at this point. And it's taken me a number of years. I wasn't ready to share it on the stage either. I needed to really work my speaking craft. I needed to be able to handle the emotional vulnerability on the stage, because one thing writing it in a book, there's another thing being able to handle that on the stage. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey. Yeah.
Well, I love how you've outlined exactly as you've described. You've got these exercises in the back, and what you've given us is the framework that you use to prepare for an actual adventure expedition into, extremes on the planet. You recognize that these 4 basic things, some of which you discovered the hard way, are the things that we can actually use to prepare ourselves for success in any sort of life adventure. One of them I love, it's like, don't forget the torch and the batteries, which makes me wonder, how many times did you maybe forget the little flashlight and batteries?
A couple times, yeah.
Number 2, you need to map out your journey if you want to reach your destination. 3, it's a good idea to consult with others who've gone before you. Seems very obvious, but I'm glad. I want to hear what, lesson, which one of your adventures led to that lesson. And then the 4th one is, do not forget your compass or your GPS and your common sense. So I love that you have these kind of 4 things just for us to keep in mind, because in all of life's adventures, they are going to come up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we wanted to just, at the end of every chapter, it's important. I didn't want it just to be a story. And some people, and it's fine, some people just want to read the story, right? And I have a number of people come to me saying, thank you so much. It's such inspiration. I love the story. And I'm like, did you do the exercise? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, your choice. But
Right. Right.
I'm not interested in that. I have zero interest in just telling you a story and then having some clap hands. It's not what I stand for. I stand for action. I stand for making a change. I stand for true inspiration and people stepping up and making a shift, right? And you're not going to make any shift by just reading a book and going, that's nice. You've got to go to work on yourself. And this book is not about me. This book is about you. This is taking you on an adventure. I'm being very, I think I'm quite funny in places. I'm being very vulnerable, showing you how I managed to screw up some epic adventures along the way and just how badly I screwed them up as well. But I'm showing you what I learned from that and therefore what you can apply in life. And those areas, this is where I'm like, we wanted to just take different angles at the end of every chapter. It's not just like, let's just do this one exercise. It's like, no, let's explore. No, let's really, take it apart in different ways. And I think different people are going to be attracted to different parts of those adventures, to the back ends of the chapters, like guides. In certain chapters, you go, okay, no, I don't think I need a guide on that one. I think I'm good. I've got that one. In other parts of the chapters, you're going to go, yeah, I have no idea about this one. I need to seek some help, right? And that's for me, that was the big one from early for me. It was I always sought help. I've always had mentors, always had coaches, always went to people who've been there and done it before me. And by the way, I still screwed it up, but I screwed it up a lot less than I would have done if I hadn't had them by my side.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that most people would say, in looking at your life and some of these adventures is, okay, I don't have that big a dream. And I love that you start the book off with us being invited to just find our own passions. And you also explain that facing adversity and opposition is going to be part of it. I think a lot of us hope that when we say, okay, I'm going to follow my passion, we think that we should have easy sailing because we're aligning with our spiritual force. But the reality is that's not the case. So talk to me a little bit about why you feel like, committing to your deepest purpose is where you're going to probably be facing even more opposition.
Yeah, I think let's just class the rest of this interview as a no bullshit zone, shall we? Can we just do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Frame it around that, please. Because there is so much shit in this industry, and there is so much shit in this whole world, and so many people get sold a duff one. It's like I've got to stop swearing. Breathe, Deri. I know I suppose non-sweary show, isn't it? No, non-sweary show. So I get passionate. When I get passionate, I just want to go for it, Andrea. You know me, like.
It's all right. Just if we need to, we'll bleep it out.
So bleep it out. So it's like people, just do a vision board, sit there meditating in front of the fridge, and everything will come true. Not true. Show me one person. Give me one person. Has anyone who's listening to this, have you ever had a tough day? Have you ever kind of tried to stretch yourself a little bit and had some tough times along the way? And let's talk about that, because people just aren't talking about the tough times, the tough decisions, the bad days. And they're coming. If you're stretching yourself, they're coming. And if you're not having any, I'd like to ask you the question, is there a load of regret coming with that? Because that smells like a life of mediocrity. Your choice, by the way, you choose. This is the beautiful thing we have as human beings. We have choice. It's what we have. And I choose the hard life. I choose the tough life. It's a life of no regrets. It's a life of stepping up. Do the businesses I run, all the stuff I do around philanthropy, the choice around my children and the amount of time I spend with them. All of this they're not easy decisions. None of that's an easy decision. But they're the right decisions for me. And that means you're going to have to make shitloads of tough decisions. You're going to be failing along the way. It's part of it, but I can tell you it's bloody worth it. That's the thing, is that if you can face the tough times, if you can understand that they're coming, and when you're in them, you can get yourself out of them, that's a life worth living for me. And that's what I stand for. This is what I stand for in business and in life.
And how do you recommend that we find our passion? How do we discover our passion?
I think it's an exploration that this is the point, is a lot of people just will do a thing and just find your passion and then you can do it in 10 minutes. I don't believe that. It took me years to find it. I think there's clues everywhere. And I think, to be honest with you, if you can just take a moment out, you know what it is. A lot of it, I think there's massive clues in childhood.
Mm-hmm. I love your little Houdini story that you told about where your little, explorer attitude came from. You mind sharing a bit of that?
Yeah, like I was brought up in West Wales, right, in a tiny little village in the depths of Wales. And for all of the American audience, Wales is not England, okay? We hate the English. We're a different country. And at age 2, I was escaping. I was just a little adventurer. I just was. My parents, God bless them, they put up 6-foot barriers in the back garden. Like my father owned the shop, and there was like metal cages which all the boxes used to arrive in, and he got all the metal cages in and put all the metal cages around the back garden to keep me in. And I managed to get over them. And the third time, I got my buggy over as well. I managed to get a buggy over a 6-foot fence. And my poor parents, they found me one time they found me about 2.5 miles away in the local village playing football with the big boys. And then another time I crossed several fields. They found my bobble cap and they'd found my buggy at the bottom of the river. As a parent now, I'm like, I must have been hell as a child because I just wanted to explore. And I spent most of my youth exploring. I was out in the fields and in the rivers and getting dirty all the time. My poor mother and her washing machine. It was just there. And then I lost it for nearly 2 decades. Yeah. So adventure and exploring and being part of nature was there as a child. Now I think we're born without fear. We're born with passions. We're born with this innate sense of who we are. It just gets trained out of us within the educational system. Sometimes we've got our parents won't encourage it either. The educational system won't encourage it either. But I think for a lot of us, and whenever I talk to clients and stuff, and I go, well, what did you love to do when you were a kid? And a lot of it's just there. It's like, I used to love to dance. And you can see the smile come back.
Exactly.
I used to love to draw. And the smile comes back. And you just go, well, why are you doing it? I go, I don't know. I just, and Priya Kapoor, a dear friend of mine, she wrote the book, Give Yourself Permission. And I think that's a perfect example, which is give yourself permission. So I think, now I don't think that's for everybody, but I think 80% of the people out there, you look back, the clues are there. The clues I think are a little breadcrumb trail. And then, the primary questions, which is, okay, if money and time wasn't an option, you had no issues with it, and you could do anything you choose to do right now, what would you do? Start there. If you're going to die in the next week and you just got a week left to live, what are you going to do? Start with some of, these profound questions, and don't skip over them. A lot of people go, I don't want to answer that. That's like too much like hard work. Well, it might be coming. Yeah. So it might be worthwhile having a moment with that. And I think we can get to it relatively quickly if you ask the right questions.
Yeah. Well, I love that you've put these questions within that chapter. So, looking back over our childhood and seeing those clues and cues of what was innate in us, that if it wasn't programmed or beaten out of us, we might like to rediscover now. So thank you for that. When we come back from this break, what I'd like to talk about next is once you fully got onto your adventure path, one of the things that Australia taught you was about how you build a vision. So when we get back, we'll pick it up from there. Tune in daily to get fired up with insight and inspiration for purposeful living, conscious relationships, and soulful success. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check out the live version of this show, where I answer your questions in real time. Visit facebook.com/Dr. Andrea Pennington. Are you prepared to live your life as an adventurer? I mean, really sink your teeth into this life and extract all the juice and the deliciousness of it. Well, today's guest is going to inspire you to do just that. And actually, he hasn't always been in the juiciest of places. From running 6 marathons across the Sahara Desert to climbing mountain peaks, it's been a life of extreme adventure, and to share some of the lessons that he's learned along the way, and many of them the hard way, it's Deri Llewellyn-Davies. So Deri, I want to pick it up when you set out onto the first of these 7 summits that you are, you've clocked yourself saying, if I'm going to live a life of no regrets, I'm going to hit all these summits. Yes, you threw in, the Marathon des Sables and an Ironman. But let's go to Australia and tell me about Mount Kosciuszko and the lesson that you learned there.
Yeah, that's where it began. The mountains began anyway. It all kind of started there in the early days. The vision was built, and I think this is the important stuff, is linking this all together, right? So there's one thing getting the purpose and the why and the passions, and go, okay, I think I've got that, but I don't believe it's one thing in life. One of my methodologies, Diamond Life Design, shows that I believe we've got passions across all areas of life, right? Yes. This isn't about one thing. And I'm very, very clear about that in the book, right? Is I'm using adventure as a metaphor for life, because it's just a good metaphor. It's just, you can get to the nuts of it pretty quickly with adventure. But this is the same for relationships, for, your home and in your environment, for spirituality, whatever it may be for you, right? It's across all areas of life. So let's just don't be too insular, because I think this is the dangerous thing out there. A lot of people go vision and there's one thing. And there's a lot of the great books, by the way, talk about that one dominating thing, which is fine, and that will work for some people. It's not for me.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Vision.
I'm with you on that. I have multiple passions, and I can focus on one thing in each of these areas so that I actually get stuff done. Yeah. But I love that you're bringing that up, because I have multiple visions as well. So talk me through the adventure vision that came.
Yeah, so remember, I've got visions for all areas of life. The adventure one, I was like, okay, so if you're going to go big or go home, right? So if this is life and you're like, okay, if before I die of no regrets, and bear in mind, adventures are calling for me, it excites me, it's something that's the depth of nature, and I want to experience this planet. So how can I experience this earth to its most magnificence was the primary question. And how can I, what adventures do I need to go on to be able to see this world at its absolute greatest? And for me, that was, okay, well, that's the 7 summits. That's the highest mountain on every continent. That means I will stand on the highest place on every continent and view every continent from its peak. The 2 poles, I get that perspective on Earth as well. I'm going to run through the desert and run through the jungle, because then I've experienced the desert as it's in its rawest form and the jungle its rawest form. And then and threw an Ironman in. I don't know why I threw the Ironman in. I think the Ironman was more of a test of human and mental endurance, because, going back at the time, it was just one of those things that intrigued me because of it was built, the whole Ironman was created to see what man could truly accomplish, and they didn't believe it was possible. So I put the Ironman in as a test of my own physical, mental, and endurance. So, and that was the vision. The vision was the global Grand Slam. Let's start there. And that's where it began. So, and now remember, it starts, you start to see how this filters down, right? It starts with the big why. It starts with the passion and the draw. And for me, that was one of the elements was adventure. Yeah. The next thing is, it's all real saying, my passion is adventure. What are you doing about it? Nothing. We'll come on to planning and action and all, I'm sure, later. But then what's the vision? What does this look like? Because if you haven't got a vision, you're probably not serious about it, and it's probably not a true passion. It's just a whim, right? So for me, and I've got this for all areas of life. Like I've got travel. I love travel. Now, a lot of people, by the way, take what I say with adventure and put it into travel, because it's a big regret in the top 6 regrets for most people. I think a lot of people are drawn by travel. And more people I talked about, they go like, yeah, I just want to see the world. I just really would love to see the world. My dad was one of his massive regrets, was not seeing the places he wanted to see. So just, substitute adventure with travel and you're good to go. I've got, I think I've done 47 countries now.
Wow.
And I've seen some incredible things. Adventures are one thing, but I've seen some of the most beautiful cities, some of the most amazing architecture. I'm massive on history and architecture. And so that's another thing. And I've got the top 100 things I want to see on travel around the world. And I think I'm knocked about 57 of them off now. So keep going. And by the way, as soon as I get near 100, I'll put another 100 on. Because this world is magnificent.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful. You were just back from Peru. And like, that was one of my first adventures was Peru and the Inca Trail. Just incredible.
It was stunning. I thought of you so many times because hitting the 7 peaks has not been one of my goals, but definitely the 7 wonders of the world. And now that Machu Picchu is among the wonders, and hiking up the Inca Trail, I was like, oh my God, just struck by the beauty and the magnificence and the energetic presence of these mountains and all of nature surrounding me and the sounds. And it was mind blowing. And so many of us described having that spiritual experience hiking along the Inca Trail, not just because, they had made that, but just because of what you do when you commune with nature. So I thought of you and how you get your fuel and your spiritual experience from it. And I totally get it.
And how did you find altitude? It's a bit sneaky, isn't it, altitude?
Well, I mean, the Peruvians are very clever. From the moment you arrive in the airport, they're giving you little coca leaves,
Yes.
So everyone there is chewing on coca leaves or drinking a coca leaf infusion tea. So when in Peru, do as the Peruvians. I was chewing on coca leaves. So I never got sick. I had a teeny bit of a headache the first day, but I was flying from France to Lima and then Lima to Cusco. So it was long, but I was great. We only had one person who got a little bit of altitude sickness, but it didn't last the whole trip.
Nice. And that's kind of like 4,000 meters, I guess you guys got up to?
I don't know in meters versus, it was pretty high.
Yeah. So then when you start to see what the stuff we're talking about is 3 kilometers higher.
Yeah.
You start to put it into perspective of altitude. And that's the thing. A lot of people look at me and the adventures and the big visions and everything else. There's one thing having a vision. The reality of the vision is another matter.
Exactly.
I had no clue what I was setting myself up for with that vision. Right. And that's the important thing here is you set the vision and you go to work. And sometimes we have no clue what that vision is going to bring. But that's why the purpose has got to be intact. This is why you've got to be moving in the right direction because it can bring significant challenges along the way.
Yeah, and that would make most people just give up. If they weren't dialed into a strong driving purpose, when those challenges come up, most people would give up.
Absolutely. And that's why. And some of you guys out there, you will listen to this or you'll go, yeah, I think it's this. And you'll say it's horse riding, right? Like my eldest Arwen, I'm like, follow your dreams, darling. So she's horse riding. So I go, okay, fine. So she then goes out horse riding. She goes a few times. No, she doesn't like horses now. So it's like, fine. Sometimes you have to explore. And especially as a child, I think we're great at bouncing back from that. She tried the piano, didn't like it. Now she's onto the violin. So it's like, good. Just if you don't explore, you think it's this, only by doing and trying will you actually work out if that is true. Now, part of that is also don't procrastinate and don't faff about, and also you've got to commit. That's another matter. But it's sometimes you have to do stuff to know what you don't want to do. And that's a big one in business, by the way. So in business times, a lot of the times is you have to do the shit in business that you don't like to do to know that you don't like to do it.
Yeah.
And then the more and more I dial, I'm really crystal clear on what I like to do and what I don't like to do because I've had to do it all. And now I know I don't want to be doing all that stuff and other people need to be doing it. But you have to do it to know it.
Yeah. So, Kosciuszko.
Yes. So the vision was set. The first one, and that's the thing. As soon as you set a big vision, you just step into it. And the first one was Kosciuszko. Let's start small. I was in Australia. I lived over there for a while. I did my MBA in between UCLA and in Sydney. And I was out there. It was a great mountain. I had a bushwhacker friend who could take me up there, and off we went into the snowy mountains.
Wow!
And little did I thought that was a mountain, and it is a mountain, but it's not. It's the smallest one. Probably a good place to start. Totally lulled into a false sense of security and what mountains were, because I was like, "Yay, this is awesome." But then, and summited pretty nicely and pretty comfortably on that one. We just had great weather. I've known a number of people who've been shut down on Kosciuszko in the wrong weather. But that trip turned into a disaster in a whole different realm of reasons. So the summit was done, check, move on. But then we went trekking into the depths of the bush in Australia, right up the Snowy River, off path, literally beating our way through. No one, no humans been there, kind of stuff, and got really sick. And that's when you realize you're in a bit of trouble.
Oh my!
Not prepared, fever, and just one couple of bad days followed that, because we were prepared, but not really. He was prepared because he's a rock hard bushwalking Aussie bush doctor. I wasn't, and got sunstroke. It was terrible. So that was my first adventure. Was we got the summit, and then we had a whole heap of shit that came with it, which I didn't even realize. Twisted my ankle falling down the banks of the Snowy River. I had to hobble my way out, miles and miles and miles. Oh my God, the pain. Now again, you could give up right then, because that was a shit couple of days. However, I experienced stuff in those few days. Yes, it was pain. Yes, I was not prepared. Yes, medically, I shouldn't. Thankfully, I had a doctor with me who gave me absolutely no sympathy whatsoever, because he was used to the hard stuff, right? Yeah. I know what you doctors are like, and I have my arm hanging off for you to give me any sympathy, right? So, it's just sickness and diarrhea and vomiting and sunstroke. Get on with it, Deri. Harden up was his message. Thanks very much, Anish. So, but that was, this is the thing. Every single adventure, and in the book, I'm very honest. It's not like, yes, I climbed a mountain, it was all good. I show you exactly what a disaster's happen, so you can go, oh, it's actually, when you're on this journey, disaster is normal. Mm-hmm. You're pushing yourself and pushing the boundaries. Tough times are coming. Challenges are going to be there. And unless you understand that and you can get over that, then you will not progress.
So that lesson of just persistence and accepting that adversity is going to come is one, but I love your story about Kilimanjaro and how you recognized that patience. So persistence is one, but patience is another. And I love the Swahili pole pole, which I hear the Tibetan people say kale kale. And anytime, it's happened to me a couple of times when I'm at a retreat and I'm like, I want more. I want to learn something. And they're just like, kale kale. So talk to me about this lesson of patience and this pole pole, or slowly, slowly, that you learned at Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, it's, and look, to this day, I'm not going to stand here, because you know me quite well, Andrea, and patience is not my virtue, right?
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Let's just be really clear about that. It's a constant issue, and I think it's a battle I'm going to have until the day I die. But it's a good battle. I'm at ease with it. So, and when you've got a big vision, you've got a big purpose, in life, in business, whatever it may be to you, it's natural that you want it all now. Of course you do, because when I'm like, I'm all in. Let's go. Started with the Marathon des Sables, straight in at the Marathon des Sables within 18 months. That was crazy. Patience. I should have spent 2 to 3 years prepping for that, right? Yeah. All in, nearly broke myself. So there's a lesson there. But in high altitude in Kilimanjaro, in high altitude, you slow down, not speed up, right? When you're pushing it in business, in life, in whatever you do, as you start getting towards the pinnacle, you need to slow down. You need to take stock. You need to be able to think about those decisions and enjoy the journey, not rush the last part. And this is what happened on Kilimanjaro. I got cold. I had the wrong kit. I really underprepared massively. My fault, totally. And I summited on massive speed because I had the wrong kit with me. Mm-hmm. And because I got cold, my idea for cold was just speed up. I'd done the Marathon des Sables 4 months previously, so I was super fit. So figured I could. Little did I appreciate altitude at this point. And so on summit day, I just left the group because a lot of them were struggling, a number of them dropped out. And I just went for it. I went for the summit. I did an epic summit. I was up and down within, I think, 7 hours, which is unheard of.
And so is that how you ended up with the acute mountain sickness?
Yeah, and then you kind of learn a little bit about altitude. So I'm talking, I was on my hands and knees vomiting on the first part of the summits. I had absolute, now I know I didn't understand altitude at the time. I came home and did a lot of research around high altitude pulmonary edema and stuff. I was definitely verging on HACE at that point, which is swelling of the brain. I was, going slightly delirious. It was just a brutal experience, which was very dangerous as well.
I know.
Hugely dangerous for what I did. I summited and I got the hell off the mountain. I'd never traveled so fast in all my life. I just ran down Kilimanjaro. It must have been a crazy sight watching me just blast past. But so I summited, but at what expense? I didn't enjoy the journey. Yeah. I don't remember shit. I remember the sunrise a little bit. I remember having some beauty in the night. The peak, touched a board, got a photo, and got the hell down. And so I lost the whole experience. I lost that whole. If I'd have just taken my time and steady, I would have just had this magical experience standing on the top of Africa and just taking that all in. And meanwhile, I just rushed through it all. I was sick, vomiting, gone slightly mental, could have killed myself through high altitude pulmonary edema. Why? Because I rushed it. And I think that's such a good metaphor in life: is pole, take your time. Patience is key. And I take that through all areas of my life. I'm constantly reminding myself of pole. I've done it again recently. I'm just doing it with business at the moment.
Yep.
It's a constant. I think some people out there will suffer from the same issue I have. When God was giving out patience, I was in the toilet, I swear. But it's a beautiful. I think the mountains teach us that you can't mess with Mother Nature.
Yes.
Not rush nature.
Well, the good news is that you are willing to be humble and open-minded to learning your lessons and then applying them. So when we get back from the break, I want to talk about the Alps and especially how we can, face the fear head on. I know that we talked about that in our last conversation and in your, epic TED Talk. But I'd love to hear your perspective on the Alps when we get back. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr.Andrea Pennington. Check me out on Instagram at Dr.Andrea Pennington. And now, back to the show. So, talking to Deri Llewellyn-Davies, author of Life's Great Adventure. So, Deri, you've already admitted that patience was not your strong suit, but you jumped into yet another adventure where I love how you wrote you were very unstylishly, you got to the top of the second pitch, puffing, blowing, sweating, and quite fearful. So it seems like some of the lessons you may have learned, you have to keep applying in your life's adventures, no?
Yeah, and that's life. I think this is... the lessons that I've laid down in this book is not like you read the book, you've got the lessons, you're done.
Right.
Next. I've literally just read the book again myself, right? I was just talking to you before we got on. I was going, I've just read the book again. It's like really good. Because for myself, I'm like reading a story about myself because I'm needing the lessons reapplied.
Yes.
And I think that's life is fear is never done. Patience is never done. Planning and preparation is never done. It's a constant evolutionary thing. And all of these lessons are constant evolutionary things. It's not something that comes and goes, ever.
So talk to us about, climbing up these glacier peaks in the Alps.
Yeah, so I think you start to move into an adventure. You decide you've got your vision. You start to take action. Planning, preparation, right? And then you end up. You're in it. You're in your adventure. You're actually doing the yoga poses. You're creating the art. You're building the business. And then stuff's going to come up, right? And there's this thing called fear is going to come up and failure is going to come up. And I had to learn how to rock climb and ice climb. And because now I was starting, so I moved through Kosciuszko and Kilimanjaro, learned big lessons on Kilimanjaro and altitude. But then I knew in order for me to move into Elbrus and Denali and ultimately Everest, then I needed to learn some stuff. Now, again, go to the mentors. So I went to the mentors going, right, I want to climb Elbrus. And they were like, well, you're not ready, son. You go and get your crampons and your ice axes, and you've got to learn how to do ice axe arrests. And I'm like, what? What's that all about? What do you mean an ice axe arrest? And I'm like, well, if you fall on ice, you're done. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I went to the Alps to learn, and I brought a mentor with me and a guide to learn. And it was brutal. Now, I look back, you've got to be careful in your choice of guides. I thought I'd chosen the right guide. The guide was teaching me rock climbing, vertical rock climbing, which I didn't actually need for high altitude mountaineering. Mm-hmm. Now, that was, and it scared the shit out of me. It really did. And the guy I was with, and I talk about this very openly in the book, the guy I was with was a great rock climber, and so was the guide. And I think they were just having a little bit of a jaunt because they knew what they were good at. And I was sucked into that world of which I didn't want to be part. I don't want to do vertical rock climbing. I'm not built for vertical rock climbing, right? And neither do I want to do it. And they were kept on saying, if you want to do Denali and if you want to do this, you need to be able to do this. And I was arguing with them. But then you refer to your guides. You've got to choose your guides carefully. That's a big one in business, by the way, and life. I'm banging on preaching about this in business all the time. Choose don't have a business coach. Don't get me started on business coaching, right? You need to run a business. But I call it coach, consultant, mentors. People have been there, done that. Same in any part of life. Choosing someone that's been there before you is super important, but choosing wisely, super important. And now I got the shit scared out of me in the Alps, and I really nearly lost all my my juju to get going. It crippled me, and it's really hampered my belief. So it was a tough time in the Alps. But I came back on Elbrus. I gave it a go anyway on Elbrus. And it was interesting how the tables were turned on Elbrus in a massive way. And on Elbrus, I managed to face that fear in a whole different way. But it was interesting because the colleague I was with who had massive altitude problems on Denali, because he didn't do poly, because he didn't prepare in the way I prepared, because he didn't, all of the other stuff I'd done kind of came to a conclusion on an early peak in Elbrus. But Elbrus taught me new lessons. And I think this is the primary lesson that I came out of Elbrus. Elbrus, it's the highest mountain in Europe. It's in the depths of Russia. A very brutal mountain, mostly ice and snow. So it's a technical climb. And what I learned there was sometimes in life you got to make tough decisions, and there's no right answer. And I think I see so many people in the business world and life generally. They're overwhelmed, they're paralyzed because they just can't make a decision. And they can't make a decision because they're seeking perfection. They're seeking the right. We're brought up in a world where it's right or wrong, where life isn't right or wrong. It's a choice, and sometimes you want to make one. And I found on Elbrus, I was there. I'd listen. I've got all my experiences, and I was going to take it easy and take it slow and poly and preparation and blah blah. So I'm ready to go now. I'm ready to go, and literally been on the mountain a day, brutal weather. The weather had been brutal for a week. Everyone was coming off the mountain. The weather was looking shit for another week, and there was one moment of opportunity that night. And the guy came to me. My colleague had already gone down. He was literally in the hut with high altitude pulmonary edema. He was sick, high altitude problems. We'd only been on the mountain for 24 hours. And the guy's like, if you want to go there, you've got to go now.
Wow.
And now we've come all the way to the depths of Russia. I was super prepared. I was doing quite all right in altitude because I've taken my time. People were sick around me. People coming off the mountain. We've got to, now bearing in mind what happened on Kilimanjaro. I got vomiting and I was in big trouble because I tried to summit too quickly and I had to acclimatize more there. What do you do? So, and there was, I'm like, do I summit? Do I go for it? Leave my colleague behind? Does he want to go? But if he comes, he could be in real trouble, but that's part of his decision, not mine. Do I just go, no, we wait and then regret that because there was a window and we could have gone for it and then the weather shuts in and we can never do it again? After we go home, haven't even had to go. No right decision to that. Also dangerous.
Yeah.
This isn't a decision of, shall I start that business? Shan't I? Shall I launch that product? Shall I write that book? Shall I do? No, this is, if you get this one wrong and then we get caught out in the middle of Denali and the storms come back down, that's not the place you want to be. And sometimes you just, and for me, this is where I've learned to stop, go into myself, meditate, and listen to the voice inside. Now, a number of people, I know people listening to your show will probably get this a lot more than the average person out there, but my inner voice is never wrong. me taking the time to listen to it is the issue.
Yeah.
And that's the piece. And when I'm in the critical, and I should listen to all the time, right? Then I just get busy. But when I'm coming to the critical decisions, that's when I dive in. And in this time, the voice told me what to do. It was very clear. Go for it. And so I did. But I think we've got to learn to listen to our inner voice.
And did Rohan get back down safely on his own?
Yes. So Rohan couldn't summit.
Because I think that's the other thing when I learned from you, that there are points of no return, like when you were describing Everest, and there are times that you will have these tough decisions about, if I go on and leave my colleagues behind, or if they were so injured that they couldn't go further up or further down, you literally have to recognize that you're leaving, maybe you're never going to see that person alive again.
Yeah, Everest. And I had to do a lot of work on myself before we got onto Everest. We don't cover Everest in this book because it's a subsequent book coming soon. But
I love this idea of these tough choices. Like, yes, you are facing life and death choices, and sometimes in business they may feel that way, but fortunately we can recover if our business fails. Yeah. You can't recover if you die on the side of the mountain.
Yeah, and I think I had to do a lot of work with my coaches on fear and decision making for Everest, because as soon as you're above 7,000 meters, you're well in the death zone, and there is no rescue. So, and I had to really get my head around that one, because and you need to be absolute in that is the decision, right? You just cannot. So, and I love this as a metaphor in life, in that you cannot, if you cannot participate in your own rescue, it's done. You can barely get yourself up the next steps. You can't carry anyone. You can't drag someone. You just have, not even the Sherpas can do that. The Sherpas are just an amazing race of people who are built for mountains. They can't do it. So above 7,000 meters, there is no rescue. So, and that's the decision, is that I could have my colleague with me, and if they go down and they cannot participate in their own rescue, they're done. Vice versa for me. This is why you have to guide it very carefully, is that you got to gauge your energy, because we've all very well getting to the summit. Yeah. The summit's halfway.
Yeah. So, but you did make it to the summit, and you were able to fully take in and appreciate that the risky decision you made had actually paid off.
Yeah, on Elbrus it was beautiful. And this is the thing. I think sometimes you take that risk, you take those moments, and this is about the moment in time, right? Kairos, which is an opportune moment in time. So this, I took that moment. We got it. Now that meant I had the whole of Elbrus to myself.
Wow.
It was me and a guide in the highest point of Europe. And when I got to the summit, I was just there. I had the whole expanse of Europe just laid out before me in the most magnificent sunrise that you've ever seen. Now, I learned, don't get me wrong, that was a tough climb, because I was not acclimatized, and it was brutal to get to the top of that. But I wasn't in the state I was on Kilimanjaro, regards Hape. And I was able to literally savor the summit beautifully, and it was magnificent.
That's also one of your big messages overall, that yes, we can have this big, huge vision or this big, huge goal, but it's not really about the summit. It's the experience and being able to appreciate the adventure along the way, right?
Yes. So many people go, there's so many phrases around, it's not the destination, it's
the journey.
Journey, blah, 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 right? And yet people go, yeah, do you really believe that, right? Now, and a lot of people listening to this, do you really believe that? Because sadly, I saw a survey was done on 1,000 people of saying, is it the journey or is it the destination? And I think it was 980 odd of them said it's the destination. Because that's the programming we've got from this goal setting and everything else. And that is complete horseshit, because what a life, right? Yeah. So if you take it in the context of Everest, right? Everest, 10,000 hours of work going into Everest, right? and I will stand on the summit for approximately 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's only because you just got to resort your oxygen, and you got to get yourself and make sure you're not bloody frostbiting, checking the Sherpa, take the view, have a photo, take a moment in front of God, and have that moment to yourself, and then get the hell off the mountain. 10,000 hours, 5 minutes.
Yep.
Right? So if it's about the destination and you're miserable through the 10,000 hours, I suggest that's a life full of regret. Mm-hmm. 5 minutes is not going to matter. And I learned this one on Aconcagua. So I went, and it's the highest mountain outside of the Himalaya in South America. And I didn't summit on that mountain, but I didn't need to. I had a beautiful journey. I had an incredible experience. And it was, the weather shut down. It was brutal. It's just the way things happen on mountains. I'll be back. But that's the thing is, if it was just about the summit, what's that all about? And if there's people in business, they're going, I will be happy when I'm $1 million business, or I will be happy when this happens, or this goal. That's good luck with that, because you won't, and you'll get there and you'll just set the next thing, and then you're in a hamster wheel.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought it up, and I'm glad that in your new adventure, bringing the diamond life design to the world, you allow people to really tap into what those big feelings and those big goals are we want to set, and then you dial it back into the moment, because that's really what life is made up of. It's made up of moments. And when we were in Peru last week, there was a strike. So the train that we were supposed to take from one point to the other to get to Machu Picchu, we couldn't take because of the strike. And we had a tough decision to make. People who had flown to Peru for the very purpose of seeing Machu Picchu, also hanging out with cool friends, we had to decide, are we going to walk the Inca Trail, or just say, all right, I'll forfeit. I won't see Machu Picchu because the train people are on strike. And our guide was very sneaky. Deri, and I'm sure you probably do this with your girls. I don't mean it in a mean way. I'm actually grateful he did it. But what he did was he said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to drive as far as we can, and then we're going to have to walk. We're going to have to walk, just an hour and a half, and then we can take another bus and go up to Machu Picchu. So, faced with 16 people, some of whom were in their 70s, some of whom had limited mobility, everyone said, an hour and a half, okay, I'll do it. Now, mind you, Deri, we got a little ways into it, and I was walking near one of the people who was really struggling, and she asked some people coming. She said, hey, how long did it take you to get to Machu Picchu? And this young, fit, healthy guy said, about 3 hours. And she just looked like all the blood dripped from her face, like, I'm not going to make it. But because our guide was very clever in the mind control, we did end up walking the entire way. And we got there. And along the way, and because you've been there, along the way we just saw the most magnificent mountains and the foliage and the beauty and the scenery, that Machu Picchu was amazing. And I'm definitely, that destination was worth it. But what we experienced along that journey, both the physical beauty that we took in, and then what each of us was able to say after walking like 10 miles, many of whom would have never believed they could do it, was we got this new sense of belief and pride and camaraderie. So I really hear you when you say that it's really about the destination. And I just want to thank you again for sharing your stories and sharing so vulnerably in this book, Life's Great Adventure.
Pleasure.
So I'm going to share just one last thing that Deri has written in the book. He says, set your goals. Go for them fully. But if life throws you a curveball and knocks you down, then just get up. Dust yourself off and go again. Never give up. You can maybe change direction, but take the lesson into every area of your life. So I hope that you will check out the book, Life's Great Adventure by Deri Llewellyn-Davies. And until next time, just remember that you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on Twitter @Dr.Andrea